The lack of transitional fossils is the trade secret of paleontology. As Gould says in the fabulous Tree of Life, there's all sorts of stuff out here in the leaves. We got a lot of leaves, but the rest of it, we don't have hardly anything.
So while we're on the evidence talk, just so that we can include some things, because it's I guess to some degree I'm kind of disillusioned with the evidence discussion as well. But while we're here, let's have the talk, just for the sake of argument. So I guess the biggest thing for evolution would be to show the transition. You know, if it had a clear fossil record, and we're told that it does. I imagine your point of view on that is that they don't know nearly as much as they say. But the two other things that I'd like to get to, and I'll let you take the reins on the fossil record, two things that I have considered as well that I think are just very strong arguments, or just things to think about when you're considering evolution, is irreducible complexity. Yes. I don't know if you're familiar with that. Yeah, okay, it sounds like you are.
The yep. Black box, Darwin's black box.
Yeah. And then also the idea of convergent evolution is another one. I don't know.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. So either way, we'll talk about all three things, but go with the fossil record.
Yeah. Well, to me, this is very simple. There are saltation theories of evolution, jump theories. Punctuated equilibrium is also what it's called.
Sure.
And this got started, I think one of the first guys was Gould. He wrote a book called Panda's Thumb. And in Panda's Thumb, he says, this is an amazing quote. He says, the lack of transitional fossils is the trade secret of paleontology. As Gould says in the fabulous Tree of Life, there's all sorts of stuff out here in the leaves. We got a lot of leaves, but the rest of it, we don't have hardly anything. And that's the state of the fossil record. I mean, when you look at what they have for us, like they give us a horse series that has like maybe 4 or 5 fossils. Between dinosaurs and birds, they give us Archaeopteryx. Darwin's theory, he, in his book, Origin of the Species, he said there would be a ton of transitional fossils, and there simply aren't. And I don't need to prove that. All I need to do is point to saltation theories and say that evolutionists themselves don't see this.
Right.
They have gone a different way. So the fossil record is not good.
So saltation theories, just to be clear, so those are theories that evolution happened in spurts, like it happened, it jumped in species, and then where there was slow change, and then a jump.
Yes. So everything kind of goes, everything stays the same. And then, there's a jump, and it's usually a dramatic mutation where a completely different form of life is born.
And those are theories that evolutionists have come up to explain the lack of fossils in the fossil record.
Yes, and it's also, they just don't see the transitional. And I respect this theory because at least they're honest about the fossils. They don't, when you think about, how many species are on this planet?
I couldn't tell you, it's a lot.
Yeah, it's a huge number.
Yeah.
And how many transitions they would have to be between even animals that are fairly alike. The amount of life forms that Darwin needs for his theory to work is astronomically large. And yet we don't have those fossils. It's a huge problem. And I don't need to make it. It was already made by evolutionists who jumped ship and said, forget it. And you know what they're doing? They're also saying the natural selection is not as powerful.
Uh-huh.
They're letting that go. So they're weakening their pixie dust. It's no longer that, the small changes get selected by natural selections. It's one big dramatic change makes a perfectly, ready to go form of new life, which is not what natural selection says.
Interesting. Yeah, well, I don't want to speak for evolutionists, and obviously I can't, but it certainly just the fact that there are saltation theories is very interesting.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So that's the fossil record. So irreducible complexity. For anyone who doesn't know, that's the idea that, and Martin, correct me if there's anything else that you know about this, but basically I've only seen it from a perspective of microorganisms. and you've got these mechanisms in microorganisms that are, maybe you've got 26 pieces in this mechanism, and all 26 are needed for this mechanism to function. Let's say it's, I think the tail of certain single-celled organisms, they have a tail that helps them move around, right? It gives them their motor skills. And that tail requires, 26 parts. Let's just assume that. And every single part is needed for that tail to function. And therefore, the argument is, how could that have come about through evolution, through natural selection? Because no one of those pieces would have brought about a positive change or a positive impact on the organism. It would have had to develop all 26 independently before it saw any benefit from an evolutionary perspective. And so that would have to come in one jump, in one, one quick jump. You'd have to go from no benefit to having that tail that was able to move around. So that's the idea behind irreducible complexity. You can't break it down anymore. And there are all kinds of examples of this. This is not, especially all over microbiology. Anything else that I missed on that?
No, that was well said. The guy is Behe, and the book was Darwin's Black Box. It's a very good book, and it's, to my mind, a devastating argument.
Yeah.
I think it's a great argument.
I've heard of that book. I've never read it, but I've definitely heard the argument before. Okay, so that's irreducible complexity. And again, these are just things to think about. Like, I'm not a scientist, and I understand the scientific method, and I don't think that it's being properly applied here. But these are just things that I think are worth pondering. So the last one was convergent evolution. Convergent evolution is the idea that that we see examples of certain adaptations that when you talk to an evolutionist, they will tell you that they all developed independently. Like flight. We have four different examples of flight. Flight in mammals, when you see bats, flight in insects, and flight in birds. And there's one more, but I don't remember. Maybe it's flying fish. I don't know. But, all the different... You have different examples of flight in nature. And yet, if you talk to an evolutionist, they would say that these developed independently. These do not have a common ancestor, or at least if they do, it's very, very far back down the chain. Insects didn't develop into birds, which then developed into bat. It's like that's not how it works in an evolutionary chain. So these things developed independently. Another example, really good example, is the squid eyeball. Happens to be very, very similar to the human eyeball. But we bear no relation to squids. At least if we do, it's very, very distant. So the idea that those could develop independently and be so similar, it just increases exponentially the chance that would be required. Just the improbability of evolution is already very strong, but the fact that you could have something that's improbable happen 4 different times is incredibly strong. And of course, I guess a similar environment, the argument would be that a similar environment would produce those similar traits. But even still, just the amount of raw chance that has to go in to make natural selection, even over a long period of time, produce what we see today is crazy. And then to say that it could happen 4 different times, 2 different times even, is even stronger. So that's the idea behind convergent evolution. Anything else that you've heard on that front?
No, you're nailing it. You're on a roll. I'm loving it.
So these are the things that I think are the hardest obstacles for evolution to overcome. But again, this is a topic that in the last few years I've just kind of been like, it doesn't interest me that much because it's all based on these fundamental assumptions, especially uniformitarianism, which is just not a strong assumption. It makes evolution be very, very faith-based. You having faith in that assumption of uniformitarianism. And if you take that away, the whole thing falls apart.